part of the lectionary, as far as the passages we had, it's what we've come to know as the temptations of Jesus. All three of the Gospels include this: Matthew, Mark, and Luke. In Matthew, the 4th chapter, the first 11 verses, it's the story that we're familiar with. Then the Spirit led Jesus into the desert to be tempted by the devil. Jesus fasted for 40 days and nights. After this, he was very hungry. And the devil came to Jesus to tempt him, saying, "If you are the Son of God, well then tell the rocks to become bread." And Jesus answered, "It is written in the Scriptures, a person lives not on bread alone, but by everything that God says." Then the devil led Jesus to the holy city of Jerusalem and put him on a high place of the temple. And the devil said, "If you're the Son of God, well, jump down, because it's written in the Scriptures, He's put His angels in charge of you, and they will catch you in their hands so that you will not hit your foot on a rock." That was one of the passages we read this morning from Psalm 92. But then Jesus answered Satan, "But it also says in the Scriptures, do not test the Lord your God." Then the devil led Jesus to the top of a very high mountain, and he showed him all the kingdoms of the world and all their splendor. And the devil said, "If you will bow down and worship me, I'll give you all these things." And Jesus said to the devil, "Go away from me, Satan. It is written in the Scriptures that you must worship the Lord your God and serve only Him." So the devil left Jesus, and the angels came and took care of him. I've heard this story and read this story a whole bunch of times, and I understood that the tests were, about our physical needs, whether or not we have bread or not, whether or not we're going to test God, and God, will you do what you say you will, and whether or not we want to have all kinds of power, the kingdoms of the world, and that the temptations fell into categories, those types of things. But understanding that, it still wasn't much that I could identify with. Mainly maybe it was my own interpretation or what I thought, but as I pictured Jesus being in the wilderness for 40 days and nights, and then the devil come and tempting him 3 times, I guess I was having flashbacks or imagining things like, what's the Christmas thing that's got Scrooge in it? Christmas Carol. Okay. We've seen that. We've seen movies, they try to depict that, or it's an animated movie. And so one of the ghosts of Christmas, either past, present, or future, comes and scoops Scrooge up, and then they fly over the city and they look at things happening and stuff. And so in my head, I was imagining Jesus and the devil flying around and doing things, and it was 2 people, and the devil was there, and he was talking to Jesus, and he was tempting him. And he doesn't do that to me. I don't see him. He's not close by. It's not somebody, with a forked tail and horns and things that show up and scare me. And so it's like, well, I don't know what Jesus is doing with the devil, whether the devil's side by side with him as they fly around. And then also the test that he was throwing out to Jesus didn't fit me, because Jesus was being tested based on the types of things that he could do, or that were a temptation for him. He was supernatural. He can turn stones to bread. He might be able to jump down and have angels save him. Maybe Satan could give him power over all the world. But again, none of those things fit me. And so even though I know this story, it was one of those things that I read, understood. This tells me about Jesus, but there wasn't a lot that I was identifying with, until I scrambled to put some notes together for this morning. But as I read again and then studied, I began to see a different dimension, and maybe this is only the way that I imagine it. But we see some things very clearly. First of all, we're in this passage because it's a religious season of Lent. And Lent then took its pattern. There's going to be 40 days of fasting. Does it ring a bell? Jesus was fasting 40 days in the wilderness. So that's the reason they have this set up the way for Lent. So from Ash Wednesday for 40 days until Easter Sunday, it's always Lent. And usually they encourage people to fast in some way, to give up something, to think about Jesus, to prepare for Easter, the glorious resurrection. Well, when we look at this passage, there's some things that jump out immediately. I'm not going to take you through all those. As I look at my notes, I'll just jump to the part that became meaningful to me. What if, instead of Jesus being sitting beside this character that was all red and has horns and everything that we imagine, this Satan character, what if instead Jesus was out there in the wilderness, he had gone to be by himself, he was there 40 days and nights because he knew his ministry was coming, and he felt the burden of, how am I going to get this done? The only thing I can think to do is go pray and fast for 40 days because there's a big job coming. And so he's there by himself, and he's going through a checklist of, what can I do to get people's attention? How can I prove that I'm the Son of God? Are they going to listen to me? Have y'all ever needed to make a plan? Maybe it's a family event. We could ask all the people that aren't here how they plan for spring break because they had to figure out what they were going to do and where they were going to go and how they were going to get there. But maybe it's just you already eventually start thinking about Easter, and am I going to have any new outfits? And guys, probably that's not what we think of. There's birthdays, vacations, Christmas, the types of things that you start making a plan for. Who's going to be there? Which side of the family is its turn for this time? What went well in times past? What can we do better? Maybe you make plans for projects. You start out saying, okay, I've got to build this new thing. I've got to create this new thing. What do I need to get it done? What kind of tools am I going to need in order to pull this whole thing off? Maybe you sit down and make plans for a new school year. What kind of lessons are there going to be? Am I changing schools? Am I in the same school? What students am I going to have? What room am I going to have? How do I decorate that room? I'm going to get ready. What kind of plans do I make? Maybe you make plans for a new job. What am I going to do? Am I going to be successful? And so you mull these types of things over. And so what if Jesus were sitting there in the wilderness for 40 days and 40 nights saying, how am I going to launch this ministry? How am I going to be the Son of God to the world? And as he has those thoughts, then these temptations could have been simply things that were inward, that he imagined. He didn't have to imagine. He was very hungry, 40 days that he was fasting. And he's looking around and he said, I could eat just about anything because I am the Son of God and I can turn stones to bread. And he thought, no, that's not what God gave me power for. And he was saying, I wonder what would it be like to be able to be the Messiah and compete with all these false messiahs that were going around and all the tricks that are in their bag. Because there was one guy, he said he was going to part the waters of Jordan. That would prove that he's the new Messiah. It didn't work. He failed. Oh, there was that other guy who said that he was going to flatten the walls of Jerusalem, just like Jericho. Well, that day came and went, and it didn't work. He failed. And then there was a guy who said he could fly. Well, that didn't work. Well, he died. But I can do these things. I am supernatural. I have powers that none of these guys have. What if I just make sure that I've got the best tricks to get people's attention, and they would then listen to me and follow me? Actually, it's beyond tricks. It's miracles. But have you ever noticed, and has ever been puzzling to you, The fact that many, many times after Jesus did a miracle, something supernatural, the next thing he said was, don't tell anybody. I don't think that he was ever out to win the world because he had the best tricks. And then what about if we just give up on God and turn to Satan? Let's just do things the world's way. And if we can make things the best in the world, well, then we'll have lots of people. They'll follow me. And Jesus said, do I want to be one more messenger of Satan? And he said no, in his own mind. I will worship God, and him only will I serve. So I did a quick search because these kind of things get my attention, and I've seen them, and I wondered, and I said, so nowadays everything on the internet is something about some number. There's the 10 best ways to lose weight, and there's the 3 best ways to get a new job, and there's the 6 best ways to plan spring break, and then they've switched over to where there's 4 things you never want to do, and the 5 biggest mistakes if you're ever going to do. And so all of these things are numbers, right? Have y'all seen those articles? I think what we just saw, what I just imagined, was that these were the 3 things that Jesus decided never to do in his ministry. He wasn't going to bribe people. Could he give them lots of bread? Yep. Could he give them everything that they might want? He sure could. He could give them nets for their fishing boats. He could give them brand new boats if he wanted to. He could give them all the bread they wanted. If they needed donkeys, I'm sure he could come up with donkeys. I don't know what they would need that would get their attention. Wine at a wedding? That would get their attention. Could he do all that? Yes. But I think he decided he didn't want to bribe people in order to have them recognize that he was the Son of God. Could he do the best tricks? Yes. And as long as he had one trick that was better than the last, maybe people would pay attention rather than to his message. Could he give up on his message and then just say, well, really, you're doing pretty good, and why don't you just keep it up? And the more selfish and self-centered you are, the more egotistical you are, the more you do your thing, and regardless of how it hurts other people, just go right ahead, he would have had a popular gospel. But I think as he was sitting there in the wilderness trying to figure out how he was going to get his job done, he decided, I'm not going to be or do any of those things. Well, I can identify with Jesus this way. My biggest struggles are not how am I going to behave, but what I'm going to think. Maybe I'm a coward and I've given up on acting out, and so my behavior is pretty much in line. But my thoughts, how self-centered are they? How corrupt are they? What do I want? I still struggle with those all the time, and I've got to decide, how do I turn those over to God and say no to Satan? Because Satan lives in my head. He doesn't pop up to drag me around and fly me around and show me different variations of Christmas or even anything else in my life. Instead, he's just in my head. So if you're like me, there's a couple of things to think about now as we consider these verses. You know that your biggest struggles were going to be internal, with the thoughts and yearnings of your heart, soul, and mind. And when you realize that, and you know what a failure you are, then you know that Jesus understands. And he was alone, but we're not. He'll be with us anytime we want to reach out. And then as you're making a plan for your life, do you want it to be based on your values and what you can give to other people? Or Do you decide your success really is going to be best served if you rely on how you might bribe people, trick people, or just leave them comfortable? Compromise and they can do what they want to. Well, this is a different twist on these scriptures. But it's one now that it's going to give me something to think about for quite some time. So if I drug you off too far and you can't figure out what in the world I was talking about or why I would identify with these things, well, I'm sorry, but surely don't understand what I think either. So. But these temptations, it makes Jesus more real to me when I think of this story this way, as he considered what was going to be big and important and how he was going to accomplish it and what he wanted to do in the face of a test. Thank you all.